When my parents called me 2 weeks before our annual family reunion to inform me that I was no longer welcome at the event that had been a cherished tradition for over 20 years, bringing together relatives from across the country to celebrate our shared heritage and maintain the bonds that connected 3 generations of our extended family through stories, photographs, and the kind of loving interactions that had shaped my understanding of what it meant to belong to something larger than myself, their explanation that my presence would be disruptive and inappropriate, given recent family tensions, was so vague and unsatisfying that I knew immediately they were hiding something far more significant than the minor disagreements and personality conflicts that had occasionally surfaced during previous gatherings, where different opinions about politics, religion, and life choices had created temporary friction, but had never resulted in anyone being excluded from the celebrations that brought us together as a family unit. The phone call that delivered this devastating news had been brief and businesslike, with my mother's voice carrying the kind of forced calm that she had always used when delivering information that she knew would be hurtful, but that she believed was necessary for maintaining family harmony and protecting relationships that might be damaged by uncomfortable truths or conflicts that could not be easily resolved through normal communication and compromise that had historically been sufficient for managing family dynamics and preserving the unity that had always been our greatest source of strength and comfort during difficult times. As I sat in my apartment that evening, staring at the reunion invitation that had arrived just days earlier, with its cheerful photographs and detailed schedule of activities that had been planned to celebrate our family's history and create new memories for the children and grandchildren who would carry our traditions into the future, I made the decision that would change everything and force my parents to confront the consequences of their lies, deception, and the elaborate cover-up that they had been maintaining for over 15 years to protect a secret that was so damaging and shameful that they were willing to destroy family relationships and sacrifice their daughter's presence at the reunion rather than risk its exposure to relatives who trusted them and had no idea that their respect and admiration were based on carefully constructed fiction, rather than the authentic achievements and moral character that had supposedly earned them their position as respected elders and role models within our family community. The family reunion that I had been banned from attending was being held at my childhood home, the sprawling Victorian mansion that had belonged to our family for 4 generations, and that served as both a physical symbol of our prosperity and stability, and an emotional anchor that connected us to ancestors who had built successful lives through hard work, integrity, and the kind of moral values that had been passed down through generations of parents who had sacrificed their own comfort and convenience to ensure that their children would have opportunities for education, advancement, and the pursuit of happiness that had characterized the American dream as it had been understood and pursued by immigrant families who had come to this country with nothing but determination and hope for a better future. The house itself had been lovingly maintained and restored over the decades, with each generation adding improvements and updates while preserving the architectural integrity and historical character that made it a treasured gathering place where family members could reconnect with their roots and share stories about the ancestors whose photographs lined the walls and whose achievements had created the foundation of prosperity and respectability that had enabled subsequent generations to pursue careers and lifestyles that would have been impossible without the sacrifices and vision of those who had come before them. The mansion's grand foyer featured a sweeping staircase with hand-carved banisters that had been crafted by German artisans in the 1890s, while the formal dining room could accommodate 30 guests around the massive oak table that had been shipped from England by my great-great-grandfather, who had believed that quality furniture and elegant surroundings were essential for establishing the kind of social credibility and cultural refinement that would enable his descendants to move confidently in elite circles where business opportunities and social advancement required not just financial resources, but also the sophisticated tastes and cultural knowledge that came with generations of prosperity and education. The library that served as the heart of the house contained over 3,000 volumes collected by family members, who had valued learning and intellectual achievement as markers of success and respectability, creating an atmosphere of scholarly accomplishment and cultural sophistication that had inspired countless family members to pursue advanced education and professional careers that brought honor to the family name while contributing to society through meaningful work and civic engagement. The gardens that surrounded the mansion had been designed by a landscape architect who had also worked on several prominent estates in Newport, featuring formal flower beds, a rose garden with over 50 varieties of heritage roses, and walking paths that meandered through groves of century-old oak trees that provided shade and beauty while creating intimate spaces for quiet conversation and reflection during family gatherings, when relatives needed respite from the organized activities and group interactions that characterized the reunion schedule. The carriage house that had been converted into guest accommodations could house 12 family members, while the main house provided additional bedrooms and common areas that could comfortably accommodate the 30 to 40 relatives who typically attended these annual celebrations of family heritage and continuing bonds. The annual reunion tradition had been established by my grandparents in the early 1980s as a way to ensure that family members who had scattered across the country for education and career opportunities would maintain connections and pass down the stories, values, and traditions that had shaped their character and worldview throughout their formative years, when family identity and belonging had been central to their understanding of who they were and what they could accomplish in life through hard work and commitment to the principles that had guided their ancestors through challenges and opportunities that had tested their resilience and determination. The gatherings had grown over the years to include not just immediate family members, but also extended relatives, close family friends, and the spouses and children who had joined our family circle through marriage and adoption, creating a diverse but cohesive community of people who shared common values and mutual affection, despite differences in age, geography, career choices, and personal circumstances that might otherwise have limited their opportunities for meaningful connection and ongoing relationships. The formal program for each reunion had evolved into a carefully orchestrated celebration that balanced structured activities with informal socializing, beginning with arrival day festivities that included a welcome reception in the mansion's grand parlor, where family members could reconnect after months or years of separation, while enjoying hors d'oeuvres prepared from recipes that had been passed down through generations of family cooks who had taken pride in creating memorable dining experiences for special occasions. The evening would typically conclude with storytelling sessions in the library, where older family members would share memories and anecdotes about relatives who had passed away, preserving oral history that might otherwise be lost while helping younger generations understand their heritage and the experiences that had shaped their family's character and values. The second day of each reunion featured the traditional group photograph session that required considerable coordination to arrange 40 family members on the mansion's front porch, in a composition that would accommodate height differences and family groupings while ensuring that everyone was visible and properly positioned for the formal portraits that would be distributed to all attendees as keepsakes and displayed in homes across the country as reminders of family connections and shared identity. The photography session was followed by historical presentations where various family members would share genealogy research, display family artifacts and documents, and tell stories about ancestors whose achievements and struggles had created the foundation for the prosperity and opportunities that current generations enjoyed and sometimes took for granted. The culminating event of each reunion was the formal dinner held in the mansion's dining room, where the extended table could accommodate the entire gathering for a meal that featured traditional family recipes alongside contemporary dishes that reflected the diverse tastes and dietary requirements of family members who had grown up in different eras and regions of the country. The dinner was accompanied by toasts and speeches that honored family achievements, celebrated milestones and accomplishments from the past year, and reinforced the values and commitments that bound the family together despite geographical separation and the inevitable changes that came with aging, career transitions, and evolving family dynamics that required flexibility and understanding to maintain harmony and mutual support. The activities that had been planned for this year's reunion included the traditional group photograph on the front porch, a formal dinner featuring recipes that had been passed down through generations of family cooks, presentations about family history and genealogy research that had been conducted by various relatives who had become passionate about documenting our heritage and preserving stories that might otherwise be lost as older family members passed away, and informal gatherings where children could play together while adults shared updates about their lives, careers, relationships, and the challenges and successes that had characterized their experiences since the previous year's reunion when everyone had been together for similar celebrations and conversations. The secret that my parents had been hiding for 15 years involved events that had occurred during my junior year of high school, when I had been selected as valedictorian and had received a full scholarship to attend an elite university that would provide opportunities for advanced education and career development, that had been the culmination of years of academic excellence and extracurricular achievements, that had made my parents enormously proud and had enhanced their reputation within our community as successful parents who had raised a daughter whose accomplishments reflected well on their values and parenting abilities. The scholarship that had made my university education possible had been presented as recognition of my academic merit and potential for future success. But the truth that my parents had concealed from everyone, including me, was that the scholarship had actually been purchased through a complex bribery scheme that had involved substantial payments to university officials and fraudulent documentation that had misrepresented my qualifications and achievements in ways that had displaced more deserving candidates who had lost opportunities because of corruption that had infiltrated the admissions process. The specific details of the fraud that had secured my university admission were more elaborate and systematic than the simple bribery schemes that had been exposed in other college admissions scandals, involving a network of corrupt consultants, athletic coaches, and university administrators who had created an entire fictional athletic profile that portrayed me as an exceptional soccer player with state-level rankings and scholarship potential, despite the fact that I had never played organized soccer beyond elementary school recreational leagues, where participation was more important than skill development or competitive achievement. The fabricated athletic credentials included falsified tournament records, doctored photographs showing me in soccer uniforms and action poses that had been created through digital manipulation, and fake letters of recommendation from coaches who had never met me but who had been paid to provide glowing assessments of my athletic abilities and leadership potential that would justify the substantial scholarship package that was being offered to secure my admission. The financial transactions that had made this fraud possible involved multiple offshore accounts and shell companies that had been established to hide the source and destination of payments that totaled over $400,000 when all fees, bribes, and consultant costs were included in the total amount that my parents had invested in purchasing my fraudulent admission and scholarship to an elite university whose reputation and alumni networks would provide advantages and opportunities that would justify the substantial expense and legal risks associated with participating in criminal conspiracy to corrupt educational institutions and steal opportunities from legitimately qualified candidates. The money laundering aspects of these transactions had involved sophisticated financial instruments and international banking relationships that had been designed to prevent detection by law enforcement agencies and regulatory authorities who were responsible for monitoring suspicious financial activities and investigating potential fraud in educational and nonprofit institutions that receive federal funding and tax-exempt status. The investigation that had exposed this college admissions scandal had been conducted by federal authorities who had been pursuing cases involving wealthy families who had used their resources to circumvent merit-based admissions processes and secure university placements for their children through illegal payments, falsified test scores, and other forms of fraud that had corrupted educational institutions and denied opportunities to students who had earned admission through legitimate achievement and qualification. The specific details of my parents' involvement in this scandal had included payments of over $200,000 to consultants and university officials who had facilitated the fraudulent scholarship and admissions process, along with falsified athletic records that had claimed I was a recruited soccer player, despite my complete lack of experience or ability in that sport, creating a paper trail of deception that had been discovered during the federal investigation that had resulted in criminal charges and convictions for dozens of wealthy parents who had participated in similar schemes. The federal investigation had been triggered by a whistleblower who had been working as an admissions consultant and who had become uncomfortable with the scope and systematic nature of the fraud that was being perpetrated against educational institutions and legitimate student applicants who were being displaced by wealthy families willing to pay substantial bribes to secure advantages that should have been based on merit and achievement rather than financial resources and criminal connections. The investigation had involved wiretaps, undercover operations, and financial forensics that had revealed the extensive network of corruption that had infiltrated multiple universities and had affected hundreds of students whose admissions had been secured through fraudulent means while displacing equally or more qualified candidates who had been denied opportunities they had legitimately earned. The evidence that had been gathered during this investigation included recordings of conversations between my parents and the criminal consultants who had coordinated the bribery scheme, financial records showing the payments and money laundering activities that had been used to hide the transactions, and documentary evidence of the false athletic credentials and academic records that had been created to support my fraudulent application. The investigation had also revealed that my parents had participated in similar schemes to secure advantages for other family members and business associates, creating a pattern of criminal behavior that extended far beyond my individual case, and that had affected numerous educational institutions and legitimate student applicants over a period of several years. The criminal prosecution that had resulted from this investigation had been handled quietly through plea agreements and sealed court documents that had allowed my parents to avoid public exposure and media attention that might have damaged their business and social relationships while they served brief prison sentences in minimum security facilities that had provided comfortable accommodations and limited disruption to their personal and professional lives during the period when they were supposedly being punished for their criminal behavior and moral failures that had corrupted educational institutions and harmed innocent students who had been displaced by fraudulent admissions processes. The minimum security federal prison where my parents had served their sentences was more like a residential facility than a traditional correctional institution, featuring private rooms with cable television and internet access, recreational facilities including tennis courts and a golf course, educational programs and vocational training that were entirely optional, and visiting policies that allowed for extended family visits and business meetings that enabled inmates to maintain their professional relationships and continue managing their business affairs with minimal disruption to their ongoing financial and social obligations. The sentences that had been imposed were significantly shorter than the federal guidelines recommended for the crimes they had committed, reflecting the influence of expensive legal representation and their cooperation with prosecutors who had been more interested in securing guilty pleas and recovering stolen money than in ensuring that wealthy criminals faced consequences proportional to the harm they had caused to educational institutions and displaced students. The plea agreements that had been negotiated by their high-powered legal team had included provisions for sealed court records and non-disclosure agreements that prevented public discussion of the details surrounding their crimes and sentences, effectively allowing them to serve their punishment in secret while maintaining their public reputations and social standing within communities that continued to respect and admire them based on false assumptions about their character and integrity. The financial penalties that had been imposed as part of their sentences had been structured as tax-deductible charitable contributions to educational nonprofits, effectively allowing them to use their criminal penalties as business expenses that reduced their tax obligations while providing minimal actual punishment for behavior that had corrupted educational institutions and stolen opportunities from deserving students. The cover-up that my parents had orchestrated to hide their criminal convictions and imprisonment had involved elaborate lies about extended business travel and health issues that had supposedly required them to be away from home for several months during the period when they were actually serving their sentences, with the cooperation of family members and business associates who had been convinced that protecting their reputation was more important than honesty and accountability for criminal behavior that had violated fundamental principles of fairness and merit that were supposed to govern educational opportunities and advancement in democratic societies, where success should be based on individual effort and achievement rather than inherited wealth and willingness to engage in corruption. The emotional impact of discovering the truth about my parents' criminal behavior and the fraudulent nature of my university admission had been devastating, forcing me to confront questions about my own accomplishments and identity that had been built on false foundations of achievement and merit that had supposedly justified my confidence and self-worth throughout my adult life, when I had believed that my success was the result of hard work and natural ability rather than criminal corruption, that had stolen opportunities from more deserving candidates who had been displaced by fraud and bribery that had corrupted the educational system. The realization that my entire academic and professional career had been built on illegitimate foundations had required extensive therapy and soul-searching to understand who I was as a person, separate from the achievements and credentials that had been obtained through criminal means rather than authentic effort and qualification that would have provided genuine pride and satisfaction in my accomplishments and potential for future success. The confrontation with my parents about their criminal behavior and the lies they had told to hide their convictions and imprisonment had been one of the most difficult and painful conversations of my adult life, involving accusations, denials, justifications, and emotional manipulation that had revealed the extent to which they were willing to prioritize their reputation and social standing over honesty and accountability for actions that had harmed innocent people while corrupting institutions that were supposed to provide fair and merit-based opportunities for educational advancement and personal development. Their insistence that they had acted out of love for me and desire to provide opportunities that would ensure my future success had been undermined by the obvious reality that their primary motivation had been protecting their own image and status within social and business circles, where having a daughter who attended an elite university enhanced their reputation and credibility as successful parents and community leaders. The decision to ban me from the family reunion had been motivated by their fear that my presence would create opportunities for conversations and questions that might lead to exposure of their criminal convictions and the fraudulent nature of my educational achievements, particularly since several family members had expressed pride and interest in my supposed academic success and had planned to use the reunion as an opportunity to celebrate my accomplishments and encourage younger family members to follow my example of hard work and dedication that had supposedly earned recognition and opportunities that were available to anyone willing to make the necessary effort and sacrifices. The investigation that I had conducted into my parents' business and financial activities had revealed additional layers of criminal behavior and moral corruption that extended far beyond the college admissions scandal to include tax evasion, fraud, and other illegal activities that had been used to generate the wealth and resources that had funded their criminal schemes, while maintaining their lifestyle and social status within communities that respected and admired them based on false assumptions about their character and integrity. The evidence that I had gathered included financial records, communications, and documentation that would be sufficient to support additional criminal prosecutions and civil enforcement actions that could result in substantial penalties and asset forfeiture that would destroy their remaining wealth and reputation while providing justice for victims who had been harmed by their criminal enterprises. The decision to attend the family reunion despite being banned had required careful planning and coordination to ensure that I would be able to enter the house and address the assembled family members before my parents could prevent me from speaking or remove me from the premises where they had assumed they could control information and maintain their carefully constructed facade of respectability and moral authority that had been essential for their position as respected elders and role models within our extended family community. The moment when I walked through the front door of my childhood home during the reunion's opening reception was met with surprised silence as family members struggled to understand why I was present, despite obvious tension and conflict that had apparently led to my exclusion from the gathering, creating an atmosphere of confusion and anticipation as people waited to see how this unexpected development would be handled by my parents and what it might mean for the harmony and unity that had always characterized our family celebrations and traditions. The speech that I delivered to the assembled family members began with expressions of love and respect for the relatives who had gathered to celebrate our shared heritage and maintain the connections that had sustained our family through generations of challenges and opportunities that had tested our resilience and commitment to each other, despite differences in circumstances and choices that might otherwise have created divisions and resentments that could have destroyed the bonds that connected us through blood and shared experience. The revelation that followed my opening remarks involved detailed disclosure of my parents' criminal convictions and the fraud that had corrupted my educational opportunities while stealing chances from more deserving students who had been displaced by bribery and deception that had violated fundamental principles of fairness and merit that were supposed to govern educational institutions and advancement in democratic societies where success should be based on individual effort and achievement, rather than inherited wealth and willingness to engage in corruption and criminal behavior. The documentation that I presented to support my accusations included copies of court records, plea agreements, and evidence of the financial transactions that had been used to purchase my fraudulent admission and scholarship, along with details about the additional criminal activities that my parents had been involved in throughout their business careers while maintaining public images as honest and successful entrepreneurs who had earned their wealth through legitimate business practices and ethical behavior that deserved respect and admiration from family members and community associates. The immediate reaction from family members to these revelations was shock, disbelief, and anger as people struggled to process information that challenged their fundamental assumptions about my parents' character and integrity, while also realizing that they had been deceived and manipulated by people they had trusted and respected as moral authorities and successful role models whose achievements and values had provided guidance and inspiration for their own life choices and family traditions. The confrontation that erupted between my parents and me in front of our extended family involved accusations, denials, and emotional appeals that revealed the extent to which they were willing to sacrifice family relationships and destroy trust in order to protect their reputation and avoid accountability for criminal behavior that had harmed innocent people, while corrupting institutions and processes that were essential for fairness and justice in educational and social systems that affected millions of people who deserved honest and merit-based treatment. The long-term consequences of my decision to expose my parents' criminal behavior during the family reunion included permanent damage to relationships with relatives who felt betrayed and deceived by people they had trusted, along with legal and financial implications, as law enforcement agencies reopened investigations and pursued additional charges based on evidence that I had provided and testimony that I was willing to offer in support of prosecutions that would ensure accountability for criminal behavior that had escaped appropriate punishment through plea agreements and sealed court proceedings. The personal costs of choosing truth and justice over family loyalty and harmonious relationships included isolation from relatives who blamed me for destroying family unity and causing pain and embarrassment that could have been avoided through continued silence and complicity in covering up criminal behavior that had already been punished through the legal system, and that many family members believed should be forgotten and forgiven in the interest of maintaining family connections and protecting innocent family members from guilt and shame associated with criminal behavior they had not participated in or known about. The validation that came from taking action that aligned with my values and moral principles provided satisfaction and peace that compensated for the loss of family relationships and social connections that had been built on false foundations of respect and admiration for people whose character and integrity had been fundamentally different from what they had presented to the world through carefully constructed public images and philanthropic activities that had been designed to distract attention from criminal behavior and moral corruption that had characterized their approach to business and personal advancement. Today, 3 years after I walked into that family reunion despite being banned and exposed to the criminal secrets that my parents had been hiding for 15 years, I work as an advocate for educational fairness and reform, using my experience and knowledge to support investigations and policy changes that would prevent the kind of corruption and fraud that had stolen my legitimate educational opportunities while harming countless other students who deserved fair and merit-based treatment in admissions processes and scholarship competitions that should be based on achievement and potential, rather than wealth and willingness to engage in criminal behavior. The lesson that emerged from this experience is that family loyalty and love should not require silence and complicity in criminal behavior that harms innocent people and corrupts institutions that are essential for fairness and justice in democratic societies, where success should be based on individual merit and effort, rather than inherited advantages and willingness to violate laws and ethical principles that protect vulnerable people from exploitation and abuse by those with greater resources and power. The relationships with family members who were able to understand and accept my decision to prioritize truth and justice over family harmony and reputation protection have been strengthened and deepened through our shared commitment to honesty and accountability that provides better foundations for authentic connection and mutual respect than the carefully maintained deceptions and selective disclosure that had previously characterized our family dynamics and communication patterns. Looking back on the decision to attend the family reunion despite being banned and to expose the criminal secrets that my parents had been hiding through lies and manipulation that had corrupted our family relationships and my own understanding of my identity and accomplishments, I realized that choosing truth over comfortable deception was the only way to break free from the moral compromise and complicity that had been destroying my integrity and preventing authentic relationships based on honesty and genuine character rather than carefully constructed facades and selective disclosure of information. Was I wrong to expose my parents' criminal behavior at a family gathering where my revelations would cause pain and embarrassment to innocent relatives who had not participated in or known about their illegal activities? Should family loyalty take precedence over accountability for criminal behavior that had harmed innocent students and corrupted educational institutions that were supposed to provide fair and merit-based opportunities? Would you have made the same choice to reveal criminal secrets at a family reunion, or should such information have been handled through private conversations that would have protected innocent family members from guilt and shame? Sometimes the most important decisions require choosing justice and truth over family harmony and personal comfort, even when those choices result in permanent damage to relationships that have been important sources of identity and belonging, but that were ultimately built on foundations of deception and moral compromise that prevented authentic connection and genuine respect.